Alright, so hello one and all, welcome back to another Mushoku Tensei episode review where I'll be going over the anime, manga, and light novel to talk about what the anime covered and what it skipped. And so this is the 15th time I've done this now, so let's just jump into it with episode 15, Slow Life in the Dolia Village. And so we begin as the rainy season is upon us. And at this point, I'm not really going to try and guess what month we're in right now. I presume it's, springtime, maybe. But at the very least, I know that we are in K418. But we see Eris playing in the bath with Minnetona and Crescent as Rudius spies on them. However, the sacred beast, Leo, nudges the box that Rudius is, hiding in. And that kind of tips guys off to find out where Rudius is. Normally, guys would probably have killed Rudius for spying on his daughter, Minnetona, but because he saved her in the village, he's letting him off. However, if he touches her, that is a whole other situation, and Rudius promptly apologizes. In the opening credits, we really get to see the effect of the rainy season, and so it's no wonder that there's no going in and out of the beastfolk villages when the waters are presumably 12 feet high. But we see Eris practice her sword skills while Minnetona and Crescent watch, all as Ruijerd acts as a guard with one of the beastfolk. And meanwhile, Rudius is inside trying to create the perfect Ruijerd figure as Geese and Gallus are in the cells. And Geese is still able to retain his clothing while Gallus Cleaner is stripped. And that night we see them all eating some delicious looking food, which aside from Rudius's prison meals, that's probably the first really good meal that they've had in probably a year and a half. And so it looks as though Rudius is trying to communicate with Leo because it seems that the beastfolk can kind of legitimately talk to the dog somehow. And yes, this is talking. And so it seems that he's trying to do that as well. And meanwhile, Eris is teaching Minnetona and Crescent the human tongue, which certainly shocks Rudius. Eris is now a teacher. That is another one to add to the list. But as Guy says that it's time for Minnetona to go to bed, he notices Eris's ring. It's the one that Ghislaine gave her on her 10th birthday. Rudius asks if he knows Ghislaine and everybody goes silent. Guys calls Ghislaine a disgrace before dragging her daughter away. And after a moment, Eris gets up and chases after him and says that Ghislaine is the best person in the world and starts to cry. Rudius then hugs Eris as Guys asks if that's true. Has Ghislaine actually changed? And Rudius says, the Ghislaine that you know might not be the same one that we know. At the very least, I respect her. But seemingly the next day, Eris is thinking about Ghislaine when Minnetona and Crescent show up and ask about her and what she's like. And Minnetona actually calls Ghislaine Auntie-Ghislaine because her father, Guys, is Ghislaine's older brother. And so Eris just goes on to praise Ghislaine and says that how if she's ever in trouble, Ghislaine is always there to save her. But Minnetona says that her father always told her to not grow up to be like Ghislaine and that she needs to train the sword in order to sharpen her mind. Minnetona, however, says that she doesn't like practicing with the sword, and Eris just tells her not to do it then. If you don't want to do it, fair enough, right? There's no reason to be forced into practicing or learning anything. However, according to Minnetona, Guys gets pretty angry if she doesn't want to practice. And Eris says that she's quite similar to Minnetona since she as well doesn't like to study. However, Ghislaine, and kind of Rudy as well, is what taught Eris to want to learn to sword fight. Minnetona then asks Eris if she can train her like Ghislaine taught Eris, and Eris of course happily accepts, all while Guys was secretly listening on to their conversation. A little bit later we see Eris training with Minnetona as Guys talks with Rudius, asking if what Eris said about Ghislaine was true, and Rudius obviously backs Eris's word up. As Rudius says that Ghislaine is now a sword king, learn magic, writing math and all that, Guys thinks that he's just joking. But Rudius simply say that people change. Some time passes and we clearly see some growth in Minnetona. Before she was just swinging her sword with no thought, but in no time at all she's jumping off the walls and bouncing around with clear thought and motive. And also something that I forgot to point out is Eris changed her hairstyle here. She put it up in little twin tails to mimic the ears of the beastfolk. So that's kind of funny. So maybe she never really hated the whole thanking thing with mimicking the beastfolk twin tails. Maybe she just hated the act of thanking or asking Rudius for something. It also explains how she didn't really hate the the beastfolk hood as well. But then again, that was also just a gift from Rudius, so I don't know. But anyway, we do also know that it's ending the rainy season, since Eris said that it's been 3 months, and the rainy season lasts about 3 months. And now soon she'll be able to move on to the next town. And as she says that, both Minnetona and Tersena get sad and ask Eris to stay there forever. But Eris says that she has a home to go to, but when she says that, Minnetona starts to cry. And then we cut to Rudius, who has just finished his Rugered figure as he goes to pet Leo, and Lochlana, Rudius' previous guard, tells him that the sacred beast is born only when the world is in peril, and in maturity it will join a warrior to save it. He should not be aroused when he pets the dog, because she can kind of smell that thing. However, as Lochlana is scolding Rudius for being horny, Tersena runs in and says that Minnetona and Eris are fighting, and so we see them scrapping on the ground as Guys and Rudius pull away Minnetona and Eris. And later that night, we see Tersena creating a small little Eris figure as she tells Minnetona to apologize to Eris. She says no, she hates stubborn jerks like Eris. But Guys walks in and says that Sir Rudius and his party will be leaving tomorrow. And so I guess for some reason, Guys now has more respect for Rudius over the past 3 months, because now he calls him Sir Rudius. But in response, Minnetona goes, "Good riddance." But then Guys then asks Minnetona how her sword fighting was going, and she says that it was fun and that, after some getting used to, Eris was a good and earnest teacher. She says that Ghislaine would probably be a good teacher as well. And we get a little shot of Ghislaine when she was younger, and apparently she wouldn't train properly, let alone even learn to speak properly. When in a bad mood, she'd always hit people and break things, and she was just kind of a little monster. Kind of like Eris. Guys says that he's thankful for the wandering swordsman, Galfarion, who showed up to take her away. He was thankful so that he wouldn't have to be associated with that failure of a sister anymore, although now he definitely regrets it. If only he had said something to her and talked it out, things could be different. But at this point, it's too late. Ghislaine will probably never return to her home again. But we then cut to Rudius and Eris as he packs and lies down. But we then cut to Rudius and Eris as Rudius packs their things and Eris lies down all depressed. But then hearing Tersena and Minnetona outside, Rudius decides to take Leo for a walk so they can have some time with Eris alone. Walking in the room, Minnetona apologizes to Eris, and after a moment, Eris goes like, "Oh, I guess I have no choice but to accept your apology. What can you do?" And so, hooray, they're friends again, because Eris is a tsundere. But we get to see the little, Rudius and Eris, wooden figure thing that Tersena made before we cut to the next day as Dead End gets ready to leave. According to Gustave, thanks to Sir Rugered, there has not been a single casualty during the rainy season, and so I guess the two of them got pretty close over the past few months and had told many past stories of their lives. As Eris, Tersena, and Minnetona cried out together, Guys asks Eris if he could spar with her before she leaves. He wants to see the swordsmanship that her sister taught her. And they all get ready in this little fighting arena thing as Leo calls the match to start, and they charge at each other, clashing their swords against one another, and that's kind of it. I guess Eris lost, maybe? Rudius then asks if he's the only one who doesn't get it, but look, I'm in the same boat, my friend. They then head off with Eris standing on the carriage giving a big wave, and it seems that Rudius had created a few Rugered statues to give to the village, since we can see both Guys and Tersena holding one each. But Tersena is holding the Rugered doll with the two little Eris and Rudius figures that she made as well, and so it's pretty cool. Maybe one day she'll be a doll figure like Rudius is. But Minnetona then yells at them to come back one day, and that when she does, she'll get stronger, strong enough to beat Eris. And now, I'll be honest, I can't recall if Eris ever does go back to the Doldia village. I know we return one day, but I'm not sure if Eris even comes back. I would love to see Eris and Ghislaine return to the Doldia village at some point in a redundancy chapter. I think that would be really nice. If there will be even more redundancy chapters, who knows? For those of you who don't know, redundancy chapters are essentially post-story content. I can't exactly get into it. They're canon, but it doesn't really matter. It's kind of just fun little stories, essentially, that happen after the main contents of Mushoku Tensei. Because there's 26 volumes total, but there'll probably be maybe 2 to 3 volumes worth of redundancy, maybe. And the author could totally add in a few more when he's adapting it from the web novel to the actual light novels. But anyway, as they leave, we hear geese running towards them like Peter trying to catch his bus, and he jumps into their carriage. Apparently he escaped the cell and made a break for it, and I'm gonna be honest, No idea how he did it. But this is the great thief, the jack of all trades, Geese, so I suppose stuff like this is right up his alley. He says that he's headed for Millis as well and that he wants to tag along until they get there. And as they ride, Rudius notes how odd the road is. It's like just oddly flat and straight. There's no like curves or bends or anything, it's just like a nice straight. I don't need to like it's a straight road. But however, it turns out they are on the Holy Sword Highway. And supposedly it was created by Saint Millis with a single sword strike. And Saint Millis is obviously like essentially like the Jesus Christ of like the Millis faith. They're the ones that the people worship, and he's apparently the founder of the religion. And as they pass by, they see what Geese calls a monument to the 7 great powers. The 7 great powers are the 7 strongest fighters in the world, and they go in order from strongest to weakest: the technique god, the dragon god, the fighting god, the demon god, the death god, the sword god, and the north god. And although I won't say who all of these people are, not that it would really spoil much, we do actually know a few names already. For instance, Galfarion, Ghislaine's former master, is the sword god, while Orsted is the dragon god, and Laplace is the demon god. Who the rest are, you'll have to wait and find out. But apparently Ruijerd had like trained back in the day to become one of the 7 great powers, and so you know he's strong. Like, chances are he could probably make like the 10 great powers if that was a thing. But what's interesting is Geese says that no one even knows if the top 4 are dead or alive anymore, those being the technique god, dragon god, fighting god, and demon god. Although we do know that Orsted's around because like we've seen him. And I don't know if the anime had already mentioned that he's the dragon god. I don't think he has, but like the light novel has already, which is why I'm bringing him up. But while Eris wishes to meet one of the 7 great powers, which she'll definitely regret, but Rudius would rather grow in silence so they don't have to run into anyone that not even Ruijerd has a chance against. Yeah, we'll see how that one works out. But anyway, that is it for the anime. We got some little bit of lore at the end and just a nice general casual time. And so let's move on to the manga. So the manga just doesn't. So the light novel puts us with Eris, Ruijerd, Rudius, Gustav, Guys, Minnetona, and Tersenna all in Gustav's house. It's explained that Minnetona has an older sister named Linnea who's off studying at a certain country. And then there's Minnetona's friend Tersenna, who is a dog girl and is a part of the Adolia tribe, and she is noted to be quite busty. But Minnetona, Tersenna, and Eris were all talking about how they're glad that they got saved and are thankful that they wouldn't have to be sold to some perverted Asuran family. And Eris chimes in saying, yeah, there's no place among Asuran nobles for that kind of scum. Then Guys bashes Ghislaine, Eris defends her, and a week passes. Because they were considered heroes, Dead End was given free food regardless if they contributed to things or not. But Rudius, bored, decides to explore and found out that there's mostly just private housing and such here. There's no like weaponsmiths or anything like that. But then he comes across a path that he's been told not to go down. And thanks to the situation with Soros, Rudius finds somewhere else to wander and actually abides by those rules. But then he comes across Geese. Apparently since Geese helped save the village, he was let go from jail. But then he says that he's 100% going to repeat the same offense once the rainy season stopped. So it seems like Geese is kind of a lost cause. But he's not some jerk, since he let Rudius keep his vest. Because in the light novel, Rudius asked to take his vest, and now Rudius sports that for the rest of the series. But now another week passes, and Rudius tries to learn the voice magic that the beastfolk use. But for some reason, he can't just learn it for more than enough to just, like, stun opponents. In order to do this, he has to push his mana into his throat and yell. However, it's likely due to like special beastfolk vocal cords that allow them to do it with such power. But Gustav wonders how Rudius is able to cast spells without an incantation, and for some reason, just because he can, Rudius praises Roxy and says that she's the one who taught him this. And he said that she was taught at Renoa Magic University, where he'll be going one day. And now a third week passed. Apparently monsters do appear in this village, including the Water Strider, which surfs just below the surface of the water so it can leap up and attack. Another monster is like this water snake that can climb up trees, and despite the beast folk's noses and sonar-like voices, not much can get by them. However, during the rainy season, that's a whole other case, and a lot does get by them. While Rudius and Eris were walking around, one of the children nearly got snatched by this chameleon reptile thing, but thanks to Rudius' stone cannon, he was able to save the child, who adorably wagged their tail and thanked him. Rudius was almost like a celebrity to the children, really, and probably for saving them, they'd occasionally come up to him and lick him on the cheek or show him their acorn collection that they gathered before the rainy season. And now Eris, being a Boreas, is overly ecstatic when being near the beastfolk children and breathed heavily while patting their heads and touching their tails. And honestly, man, I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but I'm with you, Eris. That sounds like heaven, just the wagging tail. Man, I would love to be in a beastfolk village. That sounds phenomenal. But with CRISPR technology, it might be possible. Genetic engineering, designer babies, let's go. Who cares about the moral ramifications? Let's mix the DNA. God, I want a cat person in real life. I mean, we already have pigs with human organs, so we just have to do the other way around. It's that simple. That's the future. That's where we're headed. But anyway, Rudius suggests to Ruger that they should help out with protecting the village, but Ruger denies that. It's a warrior's duty and pride to protect their own village. Unless they ask help from outsiders, he will not interfere. I mean, pretty honorable, right? But then Rudius says, but isn't the safety of the children more important than that? And after a pause, Ruger basically ran to Guise for his input if he wants Ruger to help out and protect the village and save the children. And Guise loved that idea. And so from there on, because the Doldia's warrior numbers were low thanks to the attack, Ruger would detect monsters and Rudius would attack them with his magic. Ruger, however, was still upset that the beastfolk relied on protection from an outsider who's from a completely different race. Apparently the beastfolk from 100 years ago were very much different than how they are today. But then the first month passed. Minnetona, Crescent, and Eris had started to become close friends and she began teaching them the human tongue. Guise walks up to them and apologizes to Eris, to which she then started to boast and compliment Ghislaine and Rudius. And so Guise then heads over to Rudius, where he was hiding and spying on the three girls. So he's like, Ghislaine, you actually taught her things? And Rudius says that it's because of the hardships that she had faced that she wanted to become more educated. And then Guise, after their little conversation, tells him to get out of the box or he will throw him into the water. And now, half a month has passed, and we get some information about how the Doldia tribe and its families work. The term beastfolk refers to the tribes that live in the Great Forest. There were many tribes that originated here in the Great Forest, but they have since moved to the demon continent and become known as demons. That's why many demons have animal characteristics to them, along with their 5 senses being enhanced. And so it would mean that Nokopara and Blaze were also once part of the beastfolk, but it's because they moved to the demon continent they are given a different label. Now, the Doldia tribe were pretty special among the beastfolk because they were the only tribe to maintain the peace of the forest and to protect the sacred beast. And so there were the cat-like Dodoldia and the dog-like Adoldia families. These were 2 primary families that have branched over into a dozen smaller families. This means that they're basically like the royalty of the Great Forest. This is similar to the main 4 families of the Grey Rat household, right? There's the Notos Grey Rats, Bores Grey Rats, Zephyros Grey Rats, and Euros Grey Rats. There, I believe, are more Grey Rats out there, but these are the only 4 that really matter. And then there's the Elves and Halflings that lived in the Great Forest. Although they mostly live in the northern part of the forest, while the beastfolk kind of live in the eastern region. However, all the tribes in the forest would gather for a meeting once a year and participate in a festival near the Great Sacred Tree. This is where the sacred beast is raised. And now there's the dwarves, who didn't live in the Great Forest, but further south at the foot of the Blue Worm Mountains. Blue dragons flew across the world and only returned when laying eggs and raising their young, and only returned about once every 10 years. Ruger and Gustav then broke out into old vet stories, trying to one-up each other essentially, but had become quite close and became good friends. And now we reached the 2-month point, and Leo had basically come to find Rudius whenever he was allowed to have a walk every day. And so while Rudius was making Ruger figures, so he can try and sell them and lower the fear of the people that they have when they see a supered, Leah wanted to play, and so the two of them roughhoused a bit. But then Lochlana came in and apologized for how she treated Rudius when he was in the cell, but she's like, please do refrain your affection for the sacred beast. However, by the end of the conversation, he spills the beans and he says that he's not attracted to the sacred beast, but rather it's her that he's attracted to. And so we do actually learn a little bit more about the sacred beast. As the anime and manga have explained, the sacred beast is born into the world when it's about to face calamity, and then it grows up and finds the hero that will help save the world. However, it'll take about 100 years for it to mature, and it's also noted that Rudius is not that hero. And so from there, another month passed as we arrive at the end of the third month, and the day before Dead End is ready to head out. However, that day, Eris and Minnetona had a fight, and we get a little bit more detail as to how the whole thing played out. Basically, it was like how what we saw in the anime. However, as Minnetona kept talking with Eris, the conversation got slowly more and more heated until she started to throw insults about Ghislaine and Rudius in their arguments. And Eris was still biting her tongue. She knew that she shouldn't hit Minnetona. But then it was when Minnetona threw a punch that she got completely laid out by Eris, and Eris just started to wail on her. And reading this part actually made me a little bit sad. Minnetona just wanted to keep a friend and didn't really know how to contain and express her emotions. And so in a confusing mess, she lashed out in anger only to be beaten by the very friend that you want to stay. I don't know why, but stuff like that just hits hard. However, that night, Minnetona and Tersenna tried sneaking into Eris's room and accidentally found Rudius' room instead. I don't know if I want to read this next part. They were wearing thin leather nightgowns with a gap over their rear where their waggling tails are peeking out. And this was generally what the beastfolk wore to bed. And Rudius says that Eris is in the next room, and as they were about to leave, Minnetona remembered something and walked into Rudius' room and thanked her for saving her. Minnetona was the kid that got beat really bad and could have died, but thanks to Rudius' healing, he saved her. And she says that she doesn't even have any scars, and so she flipped her nightgown up to prove it. Yeah, no, I think we're going to skip this part, actually. No, I'm not going to read what happens next. They find their way to Eris's room and they made up. Hooray. End of story. Nothing else happened. Anyway, the next day, Dead End began down the Holy Sword Highway, but as they were about to head off, Geese decided to jump in and asked if he could join them. And for some reason, both Eris and Ruijerd acted all casual about it and oh, you're joining too? Yeah, sure, why not? And so apparently, over the past few months, without Rudius even realizing it, Geese had become close with both Eris and Ruijerd. And for some reason, this bothered Rudius. Why not just ask him at the beginning of the 3 months? Why jump on board last minute and slowly befriend Eris and Ruijerd? Noticing Rudius' glare at Geese, Ruijerd asks, what's the problem if he tags along? And Rudius goes are you sure? This man is one of those criminals that you hate so much. But for some reason, Ruijerd says that he doesn't look evil, so Geese isn't evil, I guess. He's kind of flipping his entire morals for some reason. Rudius then tries to scare Geese off by telling him that Ruijerd is a super, but Geese responds with, well, that's different. I mean, he saved my life, so... And so apparently 30 years ago, Ruijerd had actually helped Geese when he was nearly killed by a monster. But after hearing the story and how Geese appreciated it, Ruijerd relaxed a bit. And so from there, they gained a new member of Dead End. No, Geese is just tagging along. He's not a permanent member. He's just an add-on. Even Rudius was getting switched up with all this stuff. Geese is very charismatic, almost parallel to Ariel. And if you don't know Ariel, apparently hearing her voice when she's 8 years old will make you just fall in love and worship her for the rest of your life. She's the princess of Asura, one of the princesses of Asura. Let me give some context there. She's not just some random 8-year-old, but just her, with her voice alone, one little speech is enough to make you worship this princess. Geese, kind of similar. Dead End makes their way to Millis with their temporary companion. Temporary. Even Rudius is getting mixed up with us. But now we actually find out a little bit more about the Holy Sword Highway, which was created long ago by Saint Millis, the founder of Millis Faith. For some reason, it was a completely straight path filled with mana, and during the rainy season as everything flooded, it would remain perfectly dry, and not a single monster would step on it. According to Geese, a single swipe of Saint Millis' sword cut the mountains and forests in half, splitting a demon king on the demon continent in two. And now, as much as that kind of sounds like some fairy tale, like, Perugius and like the Seven Heroes versus Laplace, that can sound like a fairy tale, but it's kind of plausible. But then a story about splitting the land into two, even that's a little bit of a stretch. However, because the mana the mana is still on that path to this day, it had to have gotten there somehow. So who knows, maybe the story is legit. But traveling the Holy Sword Highway is a multi-day process, and so using what Rudius learned from his plant encyclopedia as he read as a kid, he was able to pick out spices for food. And the spices here were of far better quality than the ones back on the Demon Continent. Even the meat, the rabbits and boars, tasted fine without any seasoning, unlike anything that you'd kill in the Demon Continent. This is where we really find out about like a B or C or... It's kind of a D plot, essentially, from Mushoku Tensei. It's pretty far down the chain, but this is Rudius's quest to find and make good food. We know that he's yearned about it ever since arriving at the Demon Continent, but this is really where it takes a step forward in trying to achieve it. But as it turns out, Geese is a damn good cook, and when Rudius ate his food, he called out to Geese saying, "Amazing, hold me!" And he threw his arms out around Geese, and Geese was absolutely disgusted by this, and so was Rudius. Their feelings were mutual. And so their current job assignment went like this. Ingredient collector was Ruijerd. Fire and water producer was Rudius. The cook was Geese, and the firewood collector was Eris. While Rudius' job is pretty quick, he still has his figures that he makes. But Eris' job is also quick, but it kind of just leaves her with nothing to do. And so she becomes like bored out of her mind. And so one day when Geese was preparing the food, she asks him if he can teach her to cook, implying that she wants to do it so she can make food for Rudius. But Geese just flat out tells her no. As it turns out, he used to be in a party, which at this point we can put two and two together, and we know that he's talking about Fangs of the Black Wolf. And in that party, he taught one of the women how to cook so she could please her man. And then the two got married, had a kid, and supposedly the woman was happy, but Geese claims that the man was not. That detests Eris from wanting to learn. However, the main reason why Geese was so against teaching Eris to cook is because Fangs was his party. He didn't excel at any one thing, but was pretty good at many things, but no other parties really cared for skills like that. Fangs, despite being strong, was also pretty weak in terms of coordination. Each member was basically good at one thing and that thing alone, and so Geese was needed. So when Fangs broke up, partially due to him, that put an abrupt end to his adventuring, and thus why he turned to gambling. And so from here, we learn about the 7 great powers, and here's the list again. However, we get some more information on them. Apparently, when the Second Great Human-Demon War ended, the Technique God, who was considered to be the strongest person in the world, had created this list and chose 6 others, including himself, to be the 7 great powers. Why he did is still a mystery to this day. However, due to whatever magic, the stones that these lists are found on update on their own with the current rankings. So the current list is always going to be accurate. But why people don't talk about them too much anymore is because after the Laplace War, 3 of them died in that war, 1 went missing, and another was sealed away. After several hundred years of names getting switched around, the phrase kind of fell out of use. And so here's the current status of the 7. The Technique God, missing. Dragon God, Orsted, but he is officially missing. The Fighting God is missing. The Demon God, Laplace, is sealed away. The Death God, we don't really have any information on him. The Sword God is Galfarion, and he's kind of just chilling. And the North God, we again don't really have any info on him. And so, in just a month of due to not seeing a single monster in this world's basically superhuman horses, they were able to leave the Great Forest in quite good time. However, they didn't go without a single accident, though. According to Rudius, although he kept it a secret from everybody else, he had hemorrhoids. Mushoku Tensei, everybody. But just past the Blue Worm Mountains, there was a rest station in a small dwarven city at the entrance of a valley. Although there were plenty of weaponsmiths and armories, there was no adventurers guild. According to Geese, this is where the road diverged. If you took the mountain path east, you would find a large dwarf town. To the northeast of here were elves, and the northwest was where the halflings lived. But apparently, if you entered the mountains, there was a hot spring. Unfortunately, because of the rainy season, the mountain was a bit of a mess and it would be like too much trouble just to climb it. But the Holy Sword Highway spanned across the Blue Worm Mountains, and its path kind of just cleaved a little line in the middle of the mountains. And so it created a space just wide enough to allow for like 2 carriages to pass by each other. And so traveling through this valley in just 3 days, they arrived in the holy country of Milis. And so normally I would go over the bonus story at the end of Volume 4 because it's about Guardian Fits, but because it's about Guardian Fits, I'm going to save that for Season 2 so there's no need to really repeat information this early as well. But that is it for this episode. Bit of information learned. We found out about the 7 great powers. We kind of just found out a general overview of how the Beast Tribe works and how they live, so that was pretty nice. A lot of casual little world building information here. And so, with that, I guess this is it. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe for more Mushoku Tensei content, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.